8 years for a U.S. House of Representatives member. I'm flexible with that. I won't go. I think the 12 years is too long. I know the Senate candidate would have 12 years if they were allowed to be reelected. But I have done this. For those of you who've seen it, I have a contract out there that, for me, it's easy. I write things down so that I put them in my desk drawer, so I have goals, so I know what to accomplish and am I on the right track. So I wrote a contract for the 8th District back in January on what I would do as a congressman, and in that contract was term limits. If I can't get it passed, if I cannot get it passed as a law, I guarantee you that I will step down at the end of 8 years. And I will work very, very hard to get that through Congress, because again, what I said earlier, you have to vote somebody in who's not only going to vote yes or no, but who's going to lead the fight to get 217 additional people to vote your direction, and work with Mike Pence as a leader to voice what's going on. What separates him from the rest of them is he lets everybody know what's going back in his constituents. He gets back on the radio, he talks to everyone, and lets everyone know that he's not just voting, he's fighting. And that's what we need in District 8, is someone that will fight in our Congress just as hard. Thank you very much.
But term limits, yes or no? And if yes, what would they be?
Well, I have mixed feelings about this one. When I got involved in politics around 10 years ago, I met a guy named John Hostetler. And personally, I would like to see John have a few extra terms. People like that. We do have term limits. It's called elections. I think for representatives, I don't really see the need for term limits. I hear in the Bloody Eight they have real short term limits. But for senators, yes, I would consider term limits for senators. I think that's about all I want to say about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Christie, term limits, yes or no? If yes, what would they be?
I want to start by asking the question first. How many people out here are for term limits? How many of you? Okay. How many of you are not? Yeah. It's about half and half, just because a lot of people didn't raise their hands. As I've been traveling the 8th District, when I first started running for this office, I was not for term limits, because I believe strongly in the Constitution. And I believe that the founders had a very, very good idea for what would work in our government. However, I do not believe that our founders ever foresaw that people were going to be sitting on their couches taking handouts from government and being bought and having their votes bought off. And I don't think they ever expected to see that happen in our nation. And so I think that if they were here, they may very possibly turn or change their tune. But last night I had a very interesting conversation with a couple of people after the Right to Life banquet. And they brought a very good point out. And so it got me to thinking. And as I've traveled the district, I became for term limits because of what the people said. Because I want to be a representative that listens to the people. Again, if the people are for the term limits, then we want to listen to the voice of the people. But this individual spoke again of John Hostetler and his example and not wanting to lose him. So I got to thinking today about our 4-H council, because I am a member of our 4-H council, and what we do is we have term limits, but then they set off for a period of time, and then they can run again. So I think that I would consider term limits under that ideology of allowing X amount of terms, and then you're off for a while, and then you come back home, be with the people, be in the private sector. You want to feel like you want to run again in X, and I'm not exactly sure. I know 4 years is what I had said. I would personally term limit myself. I would not, or 4 terms. I would not serve for more than 4 terms in the House of Representatives. But excuse me, I'm really exploring, because it would have to be a constitutional amendment, and we want to be very careful when we begin this messing with the Constitution, when we begin putting amendments on there. And again, like John Hostetler or someone of that caliber, we don't want to limit ourselves if we have a very good candidate. Thank you.
Thanks, Christie. John Lee Smith, term limits, yes or no? If yes, what would they be?
Thank you, Les. I'm probably the last candidate to file to run for office. My daughter Katie and I drove up to Indianapolis February 19th, really the 11th hour candidate, 11:36, Friday, the deadline. And the reason I took so long to decide was my wife and I understand the gravity of the commitment of running for Congress. We've done it before, a couple of times in fact, first time in 1988. But I thought I was done with politics. became a financial advisor, which I've done for 14 years. I really thought that's what I was going to finish my career and retire that way. But the last 3 years changed my life. You see, I was put under a lot of pressures. I was handling my clients' money, trying to deal with what was going on in the world that I was confronting. Not my fault, not my client's fault, but it forced me back on my knees and back on my books to study to see what was happening. And as I studied it, I thought I can help my clients, which we did, and we can continue to help my clients, which we can. But as a Christian, one of my responsibilities is to serve people, and I figure I can either serve my clients for the rest of my life, or I can serve my nation. And so I agreed to take on this job, really as a tour of duty, like a soldier who marches off to Washington to do a job. And that job is to represent you. And as long as I continue to serve you in a capacity that you feel you're comfortable with and I'm doing what you want me to do, I will continue to serve. Because you see, I'm an American, remember I told you, number 2, Christian number 1, conservative number 3, and a Republican last. But I stand here tonight committing to you that I will represent you with all my might to make sure that this financial recession does not linger and affect our children and our grandchildren. And that's why I'm running. John Lee Smith, thank you very much.
Hey, John.